Hello VRay users, Alex here, VRay Guide, and today I want to show you how to set up physically correct lighting by using VRay Sky, VRay Sun, VRay Physical Camera, and of course VRay Lights on Sky Portal mode. This way we will get our image photorealistically well done. Alright, so this is the first sample. If you can follow those steps and you understand what you're doing, you can follow the rest of the videos for this entire workshop. Okay, so let's get straight to the business, and I'm going to open my scene here. Alright, so I'm getting this nice message saying that I'm going to use output as 1, gamma 1. This is not the standard by Max 2015, but if you download this scene below this video, you'll be able to get it. We actually changed the gamma in INI file. I have a few video tutorials showing this, but in order to discard all the questions, just download the file, open it, and you will have the gamma 1 setup in your system. So just adopt the file gamma LUT settings, press OK, and open the file. Now as you see here, I'm going to provide this little sample but without the texture, so we can concentrate only on the lighting level 1 clay model. So as you see here, this is a box with few openings and nothing much to it. So we're going to set up cameras, sun, lighting, and the first thing that I want to do is drag and drop my camera. So I'm going to go to top view, press T, select VRay, physical camera. I'm going to press F3, so I will go to the wireframe mode and zoom out a little, and I'm going to select VRay physical camera and place it somewhere here. Okay, looking through the door. I'm gonna press C, so I'm actually going to my camera here, F3 to get out of the wireframe, and I'm gonna use this hand to tilt my camera up and get a little bit higher angle. Okay, now let's go to the camera and set the camera. I'm gonna put 50 millimeters lens. That's a very typical photographic lens. A lot of photographers use 50 millimeters. So between 50 and 35 is a good number. And everything below 35 will get very exaggerated stretched angles. Sometimes it's good with small places. I'm gonna put my f number to 4. Since we're in interior, we gotta open the aperture, so I'm gonna use 4. 4 is also a standard by a lot of photographers for interiors. Vignetting, I'm gonna leave it as it is to get a nice lens distortion, kind of dark edges on my camera. We can do it in Photoshop. Usually I turn this off, but I'm going to leave it as it is. And white balance I'm going to put on custom. Actually, I'm going to put it on neutral. Neutral is a pure white and does not being affected. We can adjust the white balance in order to get better colorization. So we will get the natural colors of the scene and equal them to the white. So that way we'll get the real colors and not yellowish or bluish results. But just putting white will be good enough for this example. I like to start from white because this is like the starting point. Shutter speed will be 100 and the film ISO will be 100. So those basically are my defaults. If the interior space is too small and the openings are too small, I'm going to increase my ISO, that's a film speed, to a higher number in order to get a little bit better exposure. With small spaces is basically what needs to be done. The rest is by default. I'm not really changing anything. No depth of field, no motion blur, no samples. Everything is by default. So this is how I set up and reset my camera. Now the next thing, I'm gonna press T and I need to put my sun. So I'm gonna go to the VRay lights, click on the sun here, and just drag right here my sun. And I will get the message if I would like to set up VRay Sky. I'll say yes. And tweak my position of the sun. I want the sun to come in through that window and have a nice shadow on the floor. Now I'm going to click L, go to the left view, pick up my sun, press Z to zoom in to this object, and I'm going to lift it up just about 45 degrees, more or less. So we're gonna go for the daytime setup. Okay, so the sun is gonna come in through that window. Let's press P and take this rotation tool and see how the sun is getting through the window to our room. Okay, so I'm gonna press C. I'm gonna press F3 so I will see what I'm actually rendering. I'm gonna zoom in a little bit more and move a little bit to the left so I can see less of that right door. So that's a good framing shot. Now let's go and check out our rendering parameters. We're gonna use very light rendering settings. So 1200 on 800. I'm actually using this 35mm here lens. That's a default, one of the default setups. I really like it because for previews it's got a nice 1200 by 800 pixels aspect ratio. Now I'm gonna save it. I'm gonna call it Nuba level 1 because it's gonna be clay model. We always start from clay model. Level 2 is textures and final lighting, and level 3 post-production. So we're gonna go through those 3 levels in our upcoming workshop, and I'm gonna teach you all the insights. As you see, I'm using the latest VRay 3.3, so pretty fast on the renders. Now let's go and check our VRay frame buffer. I'm not saving any rendering passes. Everything on global switches stays by default. I'm going to use adaptive anti-aliasing samples here, and I'm going to use for a filter area 1.5 in adaptive image sampler 1 and 4. And in order to get a little bit better quality, I'm going to put this color threshold on 0.005, so I will get really nice and sharp results. All the rest also by default, except this noise threshold, which is also going to be 0.005. In order to get a little bit better quality, I'm going to lower this to 0.2 later on my production stage. But now with samples and testing, I'm going to leave it as it is on 0.005. Environment, not much to it. I'm going to use color mapping, exponential, and gamma 2.2, dark and bright multiplier as 1. I'm going to clamp out colors 1, and subpixel and affecting background is on. Nothing much to the camera here. GI, we're going to use low and on the radiance map 3515, and on the light cache also going to use pretty low 1000. Samples going to be 0.01, ray trace 2. So this is pretty much default here. And we're going to use some pre-filters 50, and we're going to optimize the scene by clicking use for glossy ray. So all the blurry reflections will go faster. Bounces will be 100. I think it's a default. Other settings, I lowered my buckets to be 12. Smaller buckets render faster. And my dynamic memory here, I'm actually using this this laptop right here to do this stuff. So you will know my renders have to go fast. Has to render faster. So 18, I got 24 gigs of RAM, so I'm gonna use 18 of those. Oh, and one important thing, when you guys saving, make sure you overwrite this image to 0.01. So you will save it with gamma 1. Because we do have our gamma output 1, and by overriding it 1, we're gonna have the same the same results as we render, because probably you saw if you do activate your frame buffer, you might get a different result. So you might tick the sRGB and you work on sRGB in order to get the same results. I'm not gonna do that. I'm just gonna override and save my images with gamma 1. I know this stuff may be a little bit more complicated, and some of you newbies will be like, whoa, what is that guy talking about? We're gonna analyze and explain and break everything into steps in the upcoming workshop. So just stay tuned and follow this tutorial. It's not a rocket science, I promise you. If you got to this level so far, you can keep doing this section. Okay, so I'm gonna click render and see how this guy goes. So you can see here some of the materials are not working. I mean, I turned the materials off, so I will get just the color of the materials. And in order to have one clay material over those guys, we need to go and add override material, so we will not get those strange colors everywhere. I need to create VRay material, call it clay, and now I can drag and drop it here, instance, and in diffuse I'm going to add VRay dirt. So I will get VRay dirt gets those really nice ambient occlusion, soft lighting on the edges. So I will load this down to 2, and the edge is black. I'm gonna light it up a little bit so it will not be too dark. 10 is really bright. I'm gonna get a lot of shadows, a lot of those ambient occlusion, so I lowered it to 2 so get really nice and thin. And included color is white. Well, let's see how it goes with white. I'm gonna click render. Now the whole thing is getting really white because I think a lot of light being blocked. So what we're gonna do is we're going to take the glass and exclude it because we want some light come through the window. So that's another trick that you guys always, when you model and create models, make sure you have your glass on a separate layer, on a separate group, because you can hide it anytime you need to hide it. So I'm going to open my layers here, and you can see I have glass, and I can hide and unhide my glass because all my glass is in one layer, so I always like to put my glass on a different layer. Okay, so I'm gonna take this glass already a group. I grouped it, you can see it's called glass, and I'm gonna take this group and exclude it from the white material, so from the override material. So we're gonna go here, select glass, put it here, isolate it, and exclude it from the entire render. Now we can go ahead, click render. The scene is getting very white. I think the VRay dirt material. So we're gonna go here and unincluded color, that's the base color, we're gonna change it to gray. So the mid gray is 128. Click OK. Now we can press render, and voila, we're getting really nice results here. Now everything looks good, and the render, starts to calculate, and we're getting nice bluish illumination from one side, sun kind of a little yellowish that's coming from another side, and the image might look good, but it will probably get artifacts here and there, and that's one of the biggest mistakes of not using VRay sky portals. What a sky portal is, it's a VRay light that actually works as a transmitter. It takes all the energy, all the light from the outside and directs it to interior, to the inside. So if you guys not gonna use that, you might get some blotches or some artifacts or some weird light leaking results. But by using sky portals, you will actually define that space as an opening, and you will say, okay, all the particles that going in should act as interior and nothing goes out. Because right now I can get a lot of bounces inside, some of them will bounce out, so I might not get the real good realistic results. So what I need to do here is put some nice portals in my openings. So I'm gonna go to lights, select VRay light here, and actually one of the first ones I'm gonna put here on my window. T. So one is gonna go here, exactly at the size of the window. Okay, now I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna put it on sky portal mode, so you can see all of those being deactivated. Also the multiplier, it's not a light, it's just a portal. Now I'm going to take this portal and duplicate it, click shift and drag. I'm gonna duplicate it with instance. Oh, and another thing, I need to turn effect reflections and specular, because we don't want to see this reflected anywhere, because those big squares, they can get reflected in different glass objects. Okay, I press snapping tool, rotate it 90 degrees, and I'm gonna move it out. I'm gonna put it here in front of this door. I want some light coming in as this the opening. Since the opening goes all the way to the floor, I need to adjust it properly. Something like this. All right. And I'm gonna take this light one more time. I'm gonna drag and drop, drag and clone it for my other window, my other view. I have on this side another opening. And this opening doesn't have any windows because I don't really see it. So let's see how this looks. F3. Alright, so this looks also pretty good. So something like this, just to close that opening, make sure some stuff goes in. Okay, now I can go ahead and click render and see how this stuff is rendering. So I already can see that more blue light is coming in. It was not like this earlier, and more light, more natural light is getting gathered here also. So the colorization definitely works much better than the previous render, and the look and feel of the entire image is getting a little bit better. Alright, so the render is done. Let's see how we can get rid of those artifacts, those little blotches that look like dirt, and that's by boosting up our rendering settings. And we're gonna go to the GI, put here, let's put 100, let's go higher, and 45. I always keep it a little bit lower than the half, the interpolation samples. So subdivisions is how many samples you throw in your scene to get really nice good quality, and the interpolation samples is how they smoothly spread between each other. So sometimes you might get those big blotches, it's just because it's not spread and smooth enough. So interpolation samples, they responsible for smoothing out your image. If you go too high, you might lose your detail. You might get it too smooth. You might smooth a little bit too much. So after boosting this up, let's see if we can get rid of those artifacts here. Yeah, we almost got rid of them. Let's try to go from low to a little bit higher. Let's put this on custom and do 0, 1, the maximum rate, and do another sample here on the side. Takes a little longer because we got another pre-pass to render now, 4 passes to render. That means the quality goes up, the rendering time's going up, but we're gonna get much cleaner result than earlier. Voila, this looks pretty clean in compare to this one. This got still a little wavy, little blotches. This looks very clean and solid. So why don't we do this whole region here just to see if we got rid of those artifacts completely. Yep, absolutely, very clean. Maybe we get some little imperfections, but that's good enough because we want to have this little we don't have it really slick looking because it might be too plastic. So we want to get some of that realism by having those little imperfections. So that's good enough in compared to time and render quality. Let's do something about our sun, because the shadows that our sun creates, it's too strong. So let me select the sun here. And let's go make the shadows a little bit bigger. So size multiplier, let's put here 2. And render our region of the sun. Let's see how this, if we can get rid of this, those sharp. Whoops, we gotta go back to our camera, see, and click render. So we can see already here we're getting a little bit smoother look for the shadows. Alright, so we softened the shadows a little bit. We can soften them a little bit more, but we're getting really nice soft shadows here on the top. Looks much more realistic. Those of course a little sharper because they closer to the window where it's been created, but those far inside the room are getting much better realistic result. Alright guys, so this is it. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. There is more to come, so stay tuned to follow. If you were able to follow this tutorial, you can follow the rest of the workshop. Hey, download this in below, try to make this tutorial. Ask me questions if you have any. This is Alex, your VRay guide. Talk soon. Ciao.